The African Transformation Movement today launched its election manifesto in Soweto. The party, which is represented in Parliament, hopes to increase its vote share in this year's elections. Our reporter Kenny Mapanga attended the launch and joins us live now. Kenny, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, if the numbers that we saw today is anything to go by, it must have been quite a positive feedback for the ATM leadership. Just talk to us about, this large turnout today and, of course, an interesting time ahead for the party. What did the party leader, Zungula, have to say?
Well, good afternoon to you, Inati, and to the viewers at home. Indeed, ATM leader Vuyo Zungula has just completed his manifesto address to scores of supporters that gathered here at the Jabulani Amphitheatre in Soweto in Gauteng. He touched on various challenges that we are facing in South Africa, such as crime, load shedding, the economy, healthcare, and most importantly, ATM has decided that they have no interest in trying to be politically correct, with Zungula further reaffirming the party's stance on the death penalty. Now, to take you through some of those key priorities that Zungula addressed in his manifesto, he discussed the issue of healthcare, quality healthcare, almost reaffirming this universal healthcare stance or idea in South Africa that is still currently being explored. He's ensuring that ATM will bring healthcare that doesn't discriminate between the rich and the poor. So what is afforded to all is what you will see if the ATM is voted into power. He also addressed regulation with regards to certain industries to avoid exploitations of certain individuals within our society. He speaks of regulating e-hailing such as Uber and Bolt, and as well as regulating the arts so that artists and actresses, etc., musicians, as well as drivers in those industries are not exploited by some of those or lack of regulation in that particular sphere of work. The ATM movement has also spoke about the economy benefiting a few people, arguing that there is a dominance of a few private sector companies in South Africa and that the economy needs to reflect the South African society as well as all those who live in it. He speaks about the restoration of the township economy. He expresses concern that when you go to the various townships in South Africa and you look at those participating in the economy, it is not necessarily citizens of South Africa. However, you may spot that those spaza shops that are owned in the township are foreign owned. He says that we need to restore these townships' economy so they go back to the people of South Africa. On the very important issue of load shedding, he argues that South Africa does not have a problem of load shedding, but rather leaders of the country who he argues want to profit off of the suffering. That is why he argues they deliberately sabotage Eskom. That was his direct quote when he was speaking of load shedding, the challenges of load shedding in the country that we're still currently dealing with at this stage. He also asked the public to reject the idea that Eskom would be in better hands if it was in the private sector. He's also, of course, spoken about land expropriation without compensation, reaffirming that stance of ATM, saying that land dispossession of the past cannot be negotiated and that the only remedy to such would be land expropriation without compensation. He's also taken quite a tough stance on criminals in the country. Our crime levels are quite high, so overwhelming that South Africans are looking for solutions to live in a safer society. He's saying that the ATM will not be treating criminals with kid gloves. He's actually made the statement that if you are a criminal or even think of being a criminal in South Africa, your quote-unquote days are numbered, saying that the ATM is not going to be sweet to criminals. He's also argued on corrupt immigration officers. He said that ATM will introduce the life sentence without parole for immigration officers that act in a corrupt manner. He's also spoken about strengthening borders because porous borders rather enable crime in the country. He's further reaffirmed, again, as I stated earlier, Nati, that there's no apology on their stance on the death penalty. He says that the death penalty will be a reality under the ATM government, arguing that they're not going to protect the rights of those that disrespect others. That gives you a wrap of the top priorities of ATM, a party that is represented in the National Assembly, provincial legislatures, as well as local government elections, presenting you that plan ahead of the 29 May polls. Over to you in studio.
Kenny, before I let you go, I mean, you raised some very key points. I heard, him getting a lot of support from the crowd when he particularly touched on what government should be spending on. When he was talking about from the economic front, he said that government should, in fact, spend 50% of its budget, on SMMEs, and that got the crowd going. Even mentioning, of course, that some companies in this country employ only foreigners, speaking very tough there about the immigration law, something that we've been seeing from various parties. Just touch a little bit about that, please.
Well, Nazi, essentially what he is speaking about is allowing South African citizens to participate in their own economy. He's saying that in every sphere you look at, whether it is a township economy, whether you wake up and go to work and use transport, somewhere, somehow, even in SOEs as well, the private sector is involved. And you're seeing a society, 30 years in democracy, that doesn't really have a stake in its economy. He's talking about a redress in that specific context, saying that South African citizens themselves need to be given a chance to participate in economies so that their life. Democracy, rather, can mirror what the masses of South Africa look like. So he's touching on the injustices of the past, the inequality of the past, and the failure to address those injustices and redress some of the injustices we saw of the past, specifically in terms of the economy. Well, while 30 years into democracy, we've seen us progress as a society in terms of human rights and other aspects as the economy, which you can see many of those who are praising those comments want to participate in, want a role in the economy, and to also bear the fruits of this 30 years of democracy.